It's murder, Lewis.
Why do you say that?
The bruising on the face, the scratches. Coded messages, murder, right up my street. It's not a bad way to start the day.
Stand to grace.
Benedict nobis Deus omnipotens, et his donis quae ex liberalitate tua sunturis sumus, per Iesum Christum Dominum nostrum. Amen.
There are far more crime writers that we associate with Oxford.
You shouldn't be surprised about this, because you have made Oxford the most murderous city in the whole of the United Kingdom. How many body bags have you produced for it?
Well, I think my sole claim to fame, Phyllis, is that single-handedly I have made Oxford, as you say, the murder capital of the United Kingdom, and the present count, the final count for Morse was 91 corpses. I didn't count them myself, but somebody sent me 71 corpses, and I kept a little card by the television set, put +3 or +2.
Adam Dalglish can't possibly compete with that. But now I think the detective story has moved much closer to the mainstream novel. Yes. And I think it's a very important development. That the story, of course, is still vitally important. The mystery is important, and it has to be credible. In the old days, very often, I mean, with Agatha Christie, you love the book, and at the end, you realize it could never possibly happen like that. Part of the attraction of Mayhem Parva and the old mysteries is that they are not only entertaining, but they take people into an entirely different world. Very often with a modern crime novel, you're taken into the same old violent world that you read about in the newspaper and see on the television. Whereas if we go back into this comfortable village where Miss Marple lives, for example, it's peaceful. You know, the vicar might find a body on the study floor, but it doesn't much interfere with the Sunday sermon, and it's all solved by Poirot's grey cells or Miss Marple with her knitting. And then the little village is absolutely tranquil and peaceful again until the next murder happens. And that is rather reassuring to read.
Order is restored at the end, yes. Yes, I agree.
The detective story is immensely satisfying to write because it's so difficult to do well. The ones I've written that are not strictly detective stories have been much easier to write. Somebody said you've got to produce a novel in a month, or else terrible things will happen to you. I could produce a novel, and so could you, but it wouldn't be a detective story. Couldn't do it in a month.
Have you got any routine and discipline about why you write, how you write, in what room you write?
Well, I don't much care what room I write in, as long as I have a comfortable chair, a large table to hold all my research material, and the good old thesaurus and dictionary and so on, and a good light. And it's rather pleasant if I can make coffee fairly close to, so the kitchen is rather a good place, really. For years I've had exactly the same method of writing a book. I like writing by hand. Some of my friends, I think Ruth Rendell, Ruth actually writes on her computer.
But you do feel perhaps that this direct contact between pen and paper rather helps than hinders you. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I like to somehow feel the words coming down my arm onto the page. Yes. I like that feeling, and I think what one has to do with a crime writer is to hold a creative tension, to integrate the different parts of the book, the setting, the characterization, the plot, and the theme. All of those have to join together and really produce a wonderful whole. It's a very moral point of view, because it says that even the most unpopular person, even an evil person, has a right to live his or her life to the last natural moment, that murder is never justified, that murder is the unique crime, and that when it happens in any civilized society, the whole of the resources of the police force will be directed to try and discover who did it. So that is comforting.
I think I'm always a bit disappointed when it's not a murder that they're doing. I mean, if somebody steals a tin of salmon from the supermarket, it's difficult to sustain interest for 450 pages, isn't it?
Well, it's exactly so. And I say in the book that people are much more interested, you know, in who killed brutally killed Aunt Augusta than who stole her diamond necklace when she was on holiday at Bournemouth.
Didn't the Romans used to say, tot homines, quot sententia, as many men as there are opinions about why you do things?
Well, you're a classicist, no doubt, no doubt that's what it means.
I've not mentioned the wonderful cartoons which feature, I think, in every chapter in this book. I think particularly marvellous is the one about the Hound of the Baskervilles.
I think that is the funniest.
How do you go about writing your novels?
Well, I never learnt to type, and I shall do if I come back in some future life. Seems to me highly unlikely, but if I do, I shall learn how to type. I write in longhand, pen on paper, and write a lot of rubbish, and then go back and rewrite it in longhand. It's the way I always do things. And then I get it typed. I can't type myself, as I say, but I get it typed. A dear lady up the road types it for me. And then obviously make some changes sometimes then. But basically the writing thing for me, the technical, physical business of writing is pen on paper, and then again pen on paper. When it's gone through from A to Z, I just do it again and tart it up a bit.
Do you do a lot of research for each book?
Don't do any at all. I think if you write whodunits, you can't do too much research. There's a case on at the minute, isn't there, where the murder's down in Kent somewhere, where something like 100,000 depositions, statements from various people, hundreds of thousands of inquiries all here and there. Well, I mean, this is not very interesting, is it? Especially if none of them have got anything whatsoever to do with the murder. But the police, the way the police go about things has to be a little tedious. You don't get two intelligent fellas or semi-intelligent fellas coming knocking on the door and asking you these shrewd or recondite questions, do you? You get hundreds and hundreds of policemen on their hands and knees looking for condoms or whatever. I mean, this is what police is all about. And of course, it isn't very interesting unless they discover something. So you cut it all out. And I don't do any research on the police at all. And of course, they twit me about this, quite rightly so too. But no research on the police or on pathology. I don't know.
How much of you is in Inspector Morse?
Well, a meanness with money in a pub, I know it's a dreadful thing he's got, but that's not me at all. I mean, if you begin to write, unless you're a genius, which I am not, you're going to be semi-autobiographical, aren't you? So, I mean, my greatest loves in life are the poets, especially the 19th century poet. Beer, whiskey, crossword puzzle, Wagner, Richard Strauss. I mean, one can go on and say, well, that's going to be reflected in the books you write. Of course it is. And so in that sense, I suppose there's a good deal of me in Morse, but certainly not from the point of view of, he's very ungracious, he's very mean, ungracious, never says thank you, very seldom anyway says thank you to anybody. I hope that's not me. He's a bit of an amalgam.
Do you get thirsty when you think?
Yeah, well, I always feel thirsty, yeah. I think the whole business of drinking, certainly alcohol, it depends on... People are so different about it. There are some people who drink a lot and who can't think and can't speak very clearly after they've got gently merry late in the evening or something. And there are other people whose minds become more lucid, but who are not so good at maybe speaking or walking or something like that. And we're all different. And Morse has got just this one thing about him, and that is that his mind runs much more sweetly and smoothly on alcohol than anything else. So if he gets stuck, he's got to have a drink, yeah.
Now, I appeared for 10 whole seconds at the beginning credits of Twilight of the Gods. Have you ever appeared in the TV programs?
I've appeared in all of them, except a couple, I think. We had one in Australia. They didn't think I was worth a return ticket to Australia. And I think I overacted so badly, so they told me in one of them, and I was left on the cutting room floor. But I think I've appeared in all of them except two. And in this last one that's coming up, I play a very large part indeed, I have to say. Dress up as a Bishop of Oxford and say the grace in Oriel to do. So that's a huge part, isn't it?
Are you surprised at the success of Morse?
Well, not really, because it was all an aggregate, you know. You happened gradually. You write one book and then... I mean, I've never been a full-time writer. I've been in education all my life. But you write one book and then somebody says, why don't you write another one? And what about writing another one? And so it goes on. The same with the television. We did a series and somebody says, well, you know, it's just about worth another series. So you have another series. Somebody says, we might as well do three. So the whole thing is built up so gradually that I don't think it's a question of surprise, but I think very, very gratified that people do enjoy both the telly and the book so much. Obviously, it's very pleasing to any author if the readers to keep turning the pages and want to. And if the people watching the telly, you know, take the phone off the hook and say, I'm not going to be interrupted. I mean, this is a wonderful thing for somebody who's written books, isn't it? And had them done on the telly.